I'm excited. Welcome to another edition of the C-Suite Spotlight, which has a little bit of a twist. It will actually be an incorporation of both the C-Suite Spotlight as well as the Investor Spotlight, because I am being joined by another Justin Selig, who is a venture partner with Sentinel Global and is a director of product with Efficient Computer. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Absolutely. And you've spent some time at a number of different stops, including being an investor with multiple other organizations. But you have a really unique perspective that caught my attention. And you've been both an operator and an investor in startups. Can you give the audience just a brief overview of your career arc and what's landed you where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career as an engineer at Cerebras Systems. I was a kernel engineer there, and I had become a product manager. So I ended up starting a product line at Cerebras as a competitor to NVIDIA's CUDA platform. And I ran that product for a few years. And then after Cerebras, I had tried to start a company. And then I was a fellow over at Playground Global, and that didn't work out. And so I ended up actually joining Eclipse Ventures as an investor. And I was working mostly with deep tech and hardware companies in early stage investments and really helping companies of all stages. And then I ended up helping lead a seed round into Efficient Computer and then joined the company full time as head of product. And now I'm currently still at Efficient. So.
Well, very cool. And one of the things that has stood out to me about your life story was perseverance. And how did growing up in New York City as a child of an entrepreneur, as well as being a prolific tennis player, help to shape your perspective?
Yeah. So, my dad back in the 70s in New York City started this private sort of mom and pop medical practice in Manhattan. And so he was sort of my inspiration as an entrepreneur. And I got a lot of visibility early in my childhood into him being able to directly drive outcomes for his own business based on the amount of effort that he had put in. And so I developed this sort of fundamental belief that the more effort and the more determination that I have in the work that I do, the more directly that impacts the outcomes I can have. And obviously, growing up in New York City, you learn very early on to, fend for yourself. And so I got a lot of exposure to a lot of different personalities and sort of saw possibilities for what I could become in the world. And so I kind of developed this core belief that any really able-bodied person, as long as they put in enough work and effort, could shape themselves into the thing that they needed to be to get what they want. And those two things, I would say, really sort of they drive me even now.
Well, let's talk a little bit tech now. You were a very early bettor on AI accelerators, really before they were mainstream. What did you see at that time that convinced you that AI was a frontier worth building your career around?
Yeah. So I don't think anybody could have really predicted AI would become what it is now. I was operating really on a personal thesis at the time based on where I was working, which was in the autonomy industry. And so, in between my undergrad and master's, I had this internship at Uber ATG, which was the self-driving car division of Uber. Which is, it's defunct, the organization, but it was a really kind of big driver in the early stages of self-driving, of autonomy, really. And I was working on the hardware acceleration team there, and we were building a lot of these sort of fundamental machine learning algorithms on top of FPGAs, and that was not a very scalable process whatsoever. So the team was transitioning to using GPUs, and the whole team had to learn CUDA or OpenCL. And so I ended up spending my master's diving into computer architecture and the early stages of deep learning, back when everything was sort of just a research paper. In that time, the TPU paper had just come out, TPU being Google's AI chip. And so there was this combination of what I was seeing as an embedded engineer in the autonomy space and what I was seeing in the data center space, which was everything shifting towards more and more specialized compute and everything really needing to get more power efficient in order to run these really compute intensive algorithms. So the thesis that I had was in order to put deep learning onto these vehicles and have deep learning work at scale, we needed more specialized compute. And so I was personally interested in working for a startup. I really wanted to be a computer architect. I wanted to build AI chips. And I had overheard this hallway conversation at school. Someone had mentioned the word AI chip, and I just ran that down. I just found that person, was like, "Tell me about what you heard there," and like connect me to that person. And I ended up getting connected to the VP of engineering at Cerebras, what would become Cerebras, and then just emailed this guy like 10 times before he responded to me, just like, what do you want, kid? And that ultimately led to me being hired as the first new grad hire to the hardware systems org at Cerebras. Sort of the story goes from there.
Wow. Well, the grit and determination shows up again, continuing to knock on doors. I imagine that time at Cerebras really gave you a front row seat to some of the scaling challenges of compute. How did that experience at Cerebras shape the way you think about AI now? And how does it also further shape the way that you think and evaluate AI startups?
Yeah. So, a lot of what I learned from Cerebras, there's a lot obviously that I learned. In retrospect, it's very clear that AI is this huge multifaceted problem, and focusing just on compute only solves one part of the story. And so when I think about AI companies, I think about more broadly the where they sit within a broader ecosystem of software and hardware. And so AI to me is akin to saying software. And so when I look at companies, I don't look at them as AI companies. I look at them in terms of what is the value that they're actually delivering to users from a product standpoint. And that's beyond just the sort of implicit automation capabilities that you get from leveraging AI.
Got it. And so if we make that shift, so you don't seem like somebody that would make any decision accidentally. You went from engineering into venture investing. Tell us a little bit about what prompted that move.
Right. So, my career arc went from being an engineer to being a product manager. And so, in some sense, I was moving up the stack, both from a technology lens to working more in applications, but also from a business angle, I was working a lot more on strategy. And that was very intentional. I was very interested in getting a lot more involved in business level decisions. So that was always something that I wanted to do. When I left Cerebras to start a company, I was generating just a ton of ideas, and I was sharing that with friends and investors and getting a lot of feedback. And by the time I realized that what I was working on wasn't actually feasible for a number of reasons, it's a sort of story in and of itself. I had gotten this feedback from an investor friend who said, "You'd make a very good thesis driven investor." And I always thought that investing was more of a passive activity. Like you sort of sat at a desk and got pitches from founders. I didn't realize that you could actually go out with a thesis into the world and obviously it's obvious in retrospect, but like this is a way that you could operate as a VC. And so that friend connected me to Eclipse, and they were looking for an investor, and a lot of what they were doing was this thesis driven sort of activity. And it was very interesting because Eclipse was co-founded by Pierre Lamond. Pierre Lamond is like one of the legends in Silicon Valley. He used to give talks at Cerebras, and I really idolized this man. He actually helped found a number of very important venture capital firms also. And so I wanted to, as part of getting connected to Eclipse, really learn under Pierre about really how semiconductor investing works. That, and just to get a backstage peek into how this world of venture capital works, to maybe even apply it to myself for building a company one day. And that was all very interesting to me, and it was very natural that I would make that transition.
One of your biggest wins has to be spotting efficient computer with Eclipse. Can you tell us a little bit about what you saw in them? And obviously, you think very highly of them because you joined them full time as director of product.
Yeah. So when I had joined Eclipse, I had obviously spent a number of years working in building compute platforms. And when I joined Eclipse, I was really looking into investing in AI infrastructure companies. And I had a number of criteria for the things that I personally wanted to see from a technology standpoint be solved in any net new investment that we would do as a firm. And so, some of that criteria was it was very clear that software was extremely important, if not more important than hardware in building compute platforms. And having a robust and generalizable and easy to use compiler was the barrier to commercializing any new compute platform. And so when I encountered Efficient, it was super interesting because they had already built this fully functional compiler that compiled the entire C and C++ programming language, that was just unlike anything that I had seen. And it was also very clear that they were focused a lot on being capital efficient, and so they had not put a penny into hardware manufacturing until they had a fully functional simulator and a fully functional compiler, which is a complete anti-pattern from what I had seen from other compute platforms. So it was those two things from a technology angle, but also I had this thesis around, this was 2022, 2023, and it started to become clear that energy would become a huge bottleneck to deploying and distributing AI capabilities in the world. And a lot of compute companies would optimize just on power or watts as a metric, which doesn't actually solve this fundamental problem. And how do you use the power that we have, or most efficiently? How do you do more work with the power that we have, which is reflected in what's called energy efficiency? It's also measured in TOPS per watt. And so there were companies that were thinking about this, but they weren't really directly targeting this as a metric to optimize for in their platforms. And Efficient was the first company that I saw that actually delivered orders of magnitude better energy efficiency. And to me, that would be just a more and more important problem as we continue to deliver AI into the world.
Absolutely. And are there any other trends that you're seeing in the AI infrastructure, semiconductor, deep tech world these days that have you interested?
Yeah, it's super interesting. It feels like we're in this growth phase of AI software and chatbots. Just a whole bunch of investment going into this build out of data center infrastructure for that type of workload. But there's a lot of focus right now on physical AI, and people might call this embodied AI. So how do you go from interacting on your computer with AI to actually say a robot or a drone or something sort of physically actuating into the world in a more intelligent way? And so I see a lot of different companies emerging to solve problems in this space. And it's very clear that this is going to be potentially the next big area for AI to enter its way into the world.
I'm glad you brought that up because I see that as the direction that the industry is heading as well. And with robotics and physical AI in general, without revealing anything proprietary, of course, is that a segment of the market that Efficient is prepared to address?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the primary constraints that you come up against in building these physical embodied devices is the efficiency of your compute. And so when you're building solutions in this space, you're often architecting your systems such that you are trying to extend the battery life of your devices as much as possible, and that leads you to a whole bunch of trade-offs in your design. And so, if people integrate a solution like ours at Efficient, you are directly addressing this constraint, and you're able to get a lot more capabilities out of your system. You don't have to, for instance, heterogeneously integrate a whole bunch of different types of chips like NPUs and DSPs and CPUs. You only really need our chip to do all of this work. The efficiency gain that you get from using our processor is such that you can think about dedicating more capabilities to other parts of your device, or even just thinking about, like, if you swap in a processor, you just get more battery lifetime off of your device. So we are really directly addressing those areas that you described.
Well, one of the things that really drew me to you, and as we talked, became more and more apparent, is that you really embody the type of investor that I'm drawn to because it's not just about deploying capital. you roll up your sleeves and you're actively involved with helping to build companies to the extent that you actually joined one of them that you invested in. Why do you believe that hands-on investors are so critical to startups at different stages?
Yeah, and especially for deep tech companies, especially in deep tech companies, a lot of the companies shaped very early on, and generally for any startup. But when you're operating in a space where there's a lot of upfront capital requirements, you want to make sure the fundamentals are set, and you want to make sure that they're right, and that the company can build on top of those. And so having people come in who can pattern match, who can spot gaps in strategy, that's extremely important. Uh, and it's something that I personally value when I work with founders, and that they value in me. A lot of investors kind of lose the muscle of working in the trenches, and they end up losing this capacity to help directly drive outcomes for companies, or help even know what's important for companies. And so I love that aspect of the job of being able to directly work with founders in any way that I can to help them drive outcomes.
Absolutely. And when you're evaluating founders, what traits do you look for that signal someone that can navigate the long, arduous, uncertain, oftentimes very lonely road of building a deep tech company?
Yeah. It's number one is domain expertise. It's not like they have to be the preeminent scholar in their field, but it's building a deep tech company is just hard. And so you need to know from a technology angle that what you're doing is right. And really the only other thing is that they have this passion that drives them forward. Time to outcomes for hardware or even for deep tech companies generally is a decade or more. And so I look for people who, regardless of whether they get funding from my firm, they will just run down this problem and try to solve it on their own. Really, people who have that maniacal drive to solve the problem they care about.
Justin, another critical part of building a deep tech startup, maybe the most critical, is the people you bring in the organization. How important to you is team composition when evaluating a startup as far as your conviction goes on that investment? And as an add-on to that, what are the elements that you look for in team composition that give you confidence?
Yeah, so outside the fundamentals of what you look for when you're looking at a startup, really the team is almost everything. And really, the common things that I would look for is that number one, there's a technology visionary. Number two, there's someone who can really drive sales and articulate that vision and communicate it to a wider audience. And the third, really, that they can build high functioning organizations of extremely talented engineers. Those are sort of the three core pieces that I would look for.
Absolutely. And as we're starting to wind down here, a couple final questions. We've been trying to set this up for a while now, and the timing couldn't be better because there was some recent news about Efficient. Do you care to share with the audience about the news?
Yeah. So we just closed our Series A, led by Triatomic Capital. It was a $60 million round. A lot of firepower.
It absolutely gives firepower. What direction do you see near term that firepower being directed towards as far as growing and scaling the company?
Yeah, I mean, we are hiring across all functions of the company. We just blew past 50 employees recently. And so all parts of the business, hardware, software, business development, product, and customer solutions, we are full steam ahead looking to satisfy a pipeline of customers. So it's really kind of helping us execute on our mission and accelerate what we're doing.
What would you say to an engineer or a business leader who was happily gainfully employed but was interested in what Efficient's doing to convince them to hit the apply button, if you will?
There's very few opportunities in your career to work on something so fundamentally different and important in the world that doesn't look anything really like what came before. And for us, one of the last really interesting innovations in the embedded and edge space was ARM back in like 2009, I think it was. And so, if you want to work on very interesting problems with amazing and nice people, uh, really efficient is a great option for you.
Justin, you've got your whole career ahead of you, but in the next 5 to 10 years, if you're to look out on the horizon, what impact do you want to have in computing and really on the technology ecosystem as a whole?
In 5 to 10 years, I hope to be part of a world where a lot more people have access to computing technology. And those that do have access and are well meaning can build companies and do science and solve hard and meaningful problems. I care a lot about areas like medicine and climate and energy. It feels like there's this possibility of this extremely abundant future where we just have progress in all these extremely important areas. And so I hope that the ecosystem comes together in such a way that we can build towards all these outcomes.
Well, no better way than to wrap up than that, because that is the final element that had me drawn to you was a core reason years ago that I started this podcast was the democratization of AI and the responsible use of it. So you encapsulated that in both those answers. So I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm going to say until we do this again, because I imagine 6 months from now, 12 months from now, there'll be some new positive news with efficient, and you'll be on the forefront of that. But I graciously want to thank you for the time that you've shared and the insights our audience is going to be fortunate to hear about.
Thank you, Justin. It was great spending time with you.